Hey, we've got good video now.
All right. Okay. So anyway, thank you again for joining us. And so for this evening, we are going to wish Edgar Allan Poe his 214th happy birthday.
Wherever he may be.
That's exactly right. And we are going to also do a toast at the end of the episode before we disembark from the internet. And so, but our main focus tonight is horror and Vincent Price, who was heavily influenced by Edgar Allan Poe. And we're just going to discuss a little bit about him, his background and the works, and just wherever that conversation will go.
Exactly. So away we go.
Yes. And so I read the book, I'm going to hold this up, The Price of Fear by Joel Eisner, which was a very, very informative book about Vincent Price. Jason, have you, I know you said you know quite a bit about him and really love Vincent Price. I do too. Have you read or any books by him? Because I know there's others too.
No, I haven't read. I love biographies, and I just did a quick look up on some works today just to see what other products are out there, because I've seen a bunch of the films and TV series, and I enjoyed his voiceover work and everything, but the books, no, not yet. And you just showed that one up, and that's going to be on the to-do list.
It's really, really good, and it's a short read, and there's a foreword in here by let's see, hold on, give me just a moment. It is by Peter Cushing, which I thought was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And from one of the things that Joel Eisner talks about is that Victoria Price, his daughter, approved the book and things like that. It's very well done. It goes kind of basically from birth to death and all of his works. And I found it fascinating. And what was really kind of cool, because the majority of my family is from the Missouri. And so he was born in St. Louis, Missouri. And so I thought that was really neat. But he was, I think some people just assume all he did was horror if you don't know a whole lot about him.
Mm-hmm.
But he had a bachelor's of arts degree in English from Yale University, which I thought, wow.
Yeah. And not only that, but you look at the fact that he was an art collector, and an art historian, and I mean, it was a lot of things outside of the horror genre.
Absolutely. And his love of cooking and visiting, traveling. I actually have one of his cookbooks. It's actually back on a shelf over here. It weighs like 25 pounds, I think.
Oh yeah. He loved cooking.
Yes, absolutely. And but he began acting around the age of 23 at the Gate Theatre in London. And basically what took off from there in 1938, he joined Orson Welles' group at the Mercury Theater. And so I think that's kind of where it kind of jump started from there for his acting career. And his first Gothic horror movie was in 1946, Dragonwyck. Have you guys seen that one?
I haven't had a chance to see that one.
No.
It's been a while since I've seen it, but it's very good, and it's a black and white film. And I love the old classic films like that. It's definitely one to put on your list to watch.
I like how you brought in the Orson Welles tie.
Yes.
Because Vincent Price, and especially all the others during that time period with Boris Karloff and all those other ones, that is right, after the Great Depression. So a lot of America was glued to the radio.
Yes.
Because that was how FDR made his announcements, and everyone, that was the only thing they had. There was no big television, moving theater, had just started to popularize again, but they were still silent films because you had Charlie Chaplin and all those going on. But Vincent Price, one of the things that I think make him so renowned, just like the other actors in our time period, is his voice.
Yes.
Because you have to have something as to bring in the audience, to bring in those fan bases.
Yes.
And so Orson Welles getting Vincent Price, or him attaching to him, was just phenomenal, because Orson Welles took off because of War of the Worlds.
Yes.
And the radio, and now we're going to live theater. So Vincent Price, he was hitting it right when it needed to be. And I think it was just like one of those synergies where everything kind of lined up. He had the right people at the right time. So if that hadn't happened, who knows?
Exactly.
He also had the right look
Exactly.
as well.
Yes.
And a lot of times, when you look at who gets cast for roles, sometimes it's how you audition. Sometimes do you look the part someone's looking for? And you had the thin, angular, appearance with him, and it was just, very well cast and very well done on a lot of the roles he did, especially in the Poe series in the 60s.
Oh yes,
absolutely. And just his stature, his height, and just his presence. I totally agree. And he played so many diverse roles, inside and outside of horror. It's just, it's absolutely amazing. So kind of, I would say, Jason, kind of tell us a little bit about your productions that you're doing. It's kind of veering a little bit off Vincent Price, but we'll tie it all back in.
Well, I'll start a little bit with Vincent Price and kind of bring it around, because, when you look at the way Edgar Allan Poe's works have been used over the, 150 years, I guess, and you look different books and different productions, and then you're looking at movies and now podcasts and audio dramas and you name it. There's a few people that have done many things, and Vincent Price did, I think, 8 Poe movies between 1960 and about 64, 65.
Yeah.
And they weren't exact carbon copies of Poe's work. And they all had a little bit of Hollywood built in. They had a different script. They covered the main themes, but they were unique productions to themselves. And I really enjoyed that, and which is exactly one of the things, and I wouldn't say it's because of him, but it's very similar to the style of those movies, that we decided to take a different look at each of the Edgar Allan Poe works, bring something new into it, create a different character, change some dialogue, put in some different circumstances, and create productions that are honoring Edgar Allan Poe and his work, but yet unique enough to be individually ours. And that was important to us when writing the script, when doing the music, putting in the effects, creating the characters, casting the actors, you name it, to have a unique production that could not just be another Edgar Allan Poe story that's being done with another group of people, but it's a story that can stand alone on its own. And I think that was something we really tried hard to do, but still be very honorific to the original work.
Absolutely. And I think people really appreciate people doing adaptations in that fashion, because it does kind of keep the interest peaked of, we love Poe, but what can you add to it to embellish it? Absolutely.
And I wanted to make sure that I even write little intros, and before each of our audio dramas, there's a short 1.5 or 2 minute introduction that kind of leads in a little bit to the story. Sometimes it's a little bit of a caricature of what you will hear in the upcoming story, but it's also to explain a little bit of what you will see maybe that's different from what you knew of the story, so that it's not taken under a, hey, wait a minute, that's not the way that goes. Well, you're right, it's not supposed to be. And so bring a little bit of context to it before the audio drama begins. And I think that's been very good to establish a groundwork, because I don't want it to feel like we're doing an analysis of his story. It's meant to be a different take, a different adaptation, but still someone can leave there saying, I feel like I got the context of A Cask of Amontillado or of The Telltale Heart. And that's important to us.
Absolutely. And it's just another way to showcase your art form and to add that just little bit of difference and to celebrate Poe.
But at the same time, he's having to cater to current audience that
Right.
may not have that literary
Right.
want or love.
Yeah.
From
Or even,
Edgar
or
Allan
even
Poe.
background. Yeah.
And
Yeah, or
comprehension.
interest, you know,
Yes.
some people
Exactly.
hear,
Yes.
yeah, you hear about, you know, books in the public domain, and, you know, a lot of people don't think of that as, you know, entertaining reading, you know,
Exactly.
and you've got to bring it to a generation that may not be as entranced with the works from the, you know, 19th century as I am.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, one of the things that I loved when I checked out your YouTube and everything is I do love those old radio shows.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
I loved how just listening to a story and hearing the way that someone can use their voice to inflect the story and make it and build it and create that imagination, which I think a lot of this generation is losing in the social media because everything is just given and shown to them.
Mhm.
And, you know, it's not them having to build it in their own mind.
No,
So
absolutely.
that's one of the things that I love the most about you, maybe changing a few things, but still keeping the essence
Mhm.
of what you
Yeah,
want
I
out.
appreciate that. I know we in the Telltale Heart, part of my introduction is, you know, we took an amount of diligence to create sound effects that can bring the listener into the story,
Mhm.
but not immersed to the point where you can't imagine what's going on your own. I want those eerie silences of, you know, strange things happening in the dark to still be able to be in someone's mind without me telling you or hearing everything. That sometimes the silence itself is haunting enough.
Exactly.
I agree. And I love listening to audiobooks on my way to school every day. And sometimes I'll listen in the afternoon too, if I'm not too tired. And that was one thing I did really like and love about your productions is just, it was very captivating. Like I didn't lose interest because I've listened to some books that I'm like, oh my gosh, is this going to be over soon? And I never lost interest. And I'm like, I want more and more, you know.
Great. Thank you.
You do a really great job.
Thank you.
Tying back into the Vincent Price thing,
Mhm.
it's the voice. His
Yes.
voice, just like with Sean Connery, Sam Elliott, you know, those iconic voices that you just cannot forget.
Mhm.
And Vincent Price's voice was built, in my opinion, for horror because he has that low, that, you know, haunting type to his voice.
Mhm.
And it was very much catered to Edgar Allan Poe.
Well, and he was Shakespearean trained.
Exactly.
So,
And that has a lot to do with it too.
yes.
So he knows how to tell a story.
Yes.
And knows how to use what he's got.
Absolutely.
And his ability to move his character, you know,
Yes.
from
Yes.
the beginning to the end. You know, you talk about character growth and the way that your character changes through the course of the story. I think of his work in Mask of the Red Death.
Oh, yes.
And,
Oh, yes.
And it started spooky, but it ended, you know, devilish.
Yes.
And his you know, I mean, his character changing to a degree where you almost saw a madness kick in as it got closer and closer toward the end.
Mhm.
And just the way, and it didn't look forced. It was very natural. He just did a great job embodying, you know, that character the entire time. It was impressive.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of my favorite stories to read, to teach, and to watch the movie. And the one thing I love about that Corman film is the colors, because Poe describes the colors in such vivid detail. Now, Corman used a few colors that are not what Poe used, and I'm okay with that. But the Technicolor, I guess, of what they use, I'm assuming that's what they used, but it was so bright and vivid. And I got the opportunity to watch right around Halloween with a really good friend of ours on 4K, because it had just been, I think, released. And oh my gosh, I saw it like I've never seen it before. It was amazing.
Yeah, no, it was interesting because I watched it, read the story and everything as we were starting to do the script for our production of Mask of the Red Death, which we're in, you know, we've recorded it. It's in production now.
Oh, wonderful.
And part of what I wanted to do was, you know, see various different styles, you know, make sure that nothing that we did could be like, oh yeah, I've seen so and so do that before, or I saw that on this movie, so I want to make sure that when you listen to ours that it is original and it has a vision to it that can be unique. And I honestly, we haven't seen them all. I don't make that claim that I have, but you try to do some homework. Try to do some homework and make sure that you do your best, to bring an original take to something. But I was really struck by the rooms, and I know that in an audio drama, when so much is visual, that can be very challenging. And so, how do we negotiate the colors of the rooms and what happens in each? And I think we came up with a pretty good solution. To where it's not just someone listening to, oh, okay, well, this is basically like gone into an audiobook now. It's still dramatized, but it had to be done in a way that I wanted to keep that piece of it. And it was difficult to try to work that into a script.
Yeah, I will look forward to listening to that once you have it in, out for everybody to see.
That'll be our 5th and final one.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now I think, are you doing other productions of different literature, or?
The plan is for sure. We started with Edgar Allan Poe, for a couple of reasons. One is I love his work.
Yes.
And I think I wrote the script for The Raven in 2011, and it took me 10 years to get it to a point, and my own skills, I guess, to a point where I could feel like, let's go ahead and actually do this.
Okay.
And they're, digestible, 10 to 20 minutes, sometimes up to half an hour. And so you're not biting off too much, but you're certainly able to produce a good story. And we really enjoyed that. But we do plan to go on to other works. And I think Treasure Island is where we're currently looking for the next go, and how to do that one uniquely.
Yes.
Cool.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Yeah, absolutely. I can only imagine, just especially like you say, taking the visuals and making them such, quality audio to, like you said, not lose the interest of the listener, and making them so vivid. I was going to say, here lately with my students, we've been working on figurative language, and imagery has been a very big thing. And sometimes all they talk about is just the visual things. And I'm like, no, you gotta use your other senses. And so, but we read a lot of things out loud and discuss and annotate and everything else. And so, kind of going back to Vincent Price and the Corman films, trying to think, I have seen all of them, but some of them I've seen more recently than others. I finally watched Tomb of Ligeia right around Halloween, and I really liked it. It was not my favorite of the films, but that was one of the last ones he did for Corman. And so I don't know if I don't know if it was like, okay, it was a good film, but it didn't seem as interesting as some of the other ones to me.
Well, it's a, I don't know, in my take on it, the other ones were more popular, like they were more popular stories.
I think you're right. I think you're
tackled
right.
a story that was lesser known, and it didn't already have that buy-in. And so sometimes that can be difficult.
Yeah. And I like the post story of Ligeia, but I didn't connect with the film as much as I had hoped I would, but I liked it. I don't take me wrong, I didn't dislike it.
Oh yeah. Right.
But I think my favorite of all of the Corman films is probably the first one they did, with the Fall of the House of Usher. Yes.
Yeah.
He became Roderick Usher, in my opinion. I really
I fully agree. And I think that goes back to my original comment about casting.
Yes.
And the ability for him to just, embody that role. Of course, we see the finished product, there's, everything else that goes along the way.
Oh yeah.
But he's, he was meant for these kind of roles, as you said. And this one was a great way to start. Plus it was made so cheap, and it earned, millions at the box office in 1960. So that was a heck of a good production for he and the production company.
Yeah, and one thing I read, which I thought was really interesting, was that the last horror film he made before House of Usher in 1960 was The Fly in 1958. And one of the things that the book alluded to, and another article that I read, was that, so I'm going to do the air quotes, supposedly he might have been tired of, doing horror at this point, and that they kind of roped him into House of Usher. But I kind of wonder if that's really true or not. You kind of,
Well, during that time period, a lot of what Hollywood as a whole, I'm going to throw it out there, was into is they were trying to utilize those actors that they knew were bringing in the public, that everybody loved, and they were a very staple of a certain character.
Right.
Like, Vincent Price was very much a horror character. Boris Karloff, his main ones that you can think of were always designed because, think of it, Boris Karloff was in the Auguste Dupin, the Rue Morgue murders, and those kinds of things. So they were very much central on what they could bring to the table, but also what they could bring into the audience for the production companies, for those types of people. And so it was very much that time period, I think, because you had Cagney coming in, you had, Stewart, you had all those that were coming into the field that were taking the more melodramatic, in my instances,
yes,
and the more drama, where the other ones were already in the staple of being cast in the horror.
Yes.
So I think that kind of hurt rather than helped. Forecasting wise.
Yeah.
Well, and I wonder too, and I don't know the answer to this, but I know that it was fairly popular in that time to be on contract with a studio for X number of projects or films. And I don't know whether or not this may have been something that he got involved with Usher, but it was because of having a longer term deal to do more of these pictures as the years went on. I don't know.
Yes, I do. One of the things, because he was, because it was AIP was the production company that did this with Corman. One of the things that I read, I'm kind of looking at my notes, when he did, when Corman did the one Poe film that was not Vincent Price, it was The Premature Burial in 1962 with Ray Milland, I always mispronounce that. Apparently, Corman wanted to do it with AIP and wanted Vincent Price. And I think at the very moment that it was going to start production, what happened was Corman had to end up recasting and finding Ray Milland and go a different production company. And then that AIP came back and said, oh no, we want to do this with Vincent Price. And he goes, well, I'm already started. And so that's how that one came about and kind of took a digression from Price and AIP.
Okay. So he may have had a contract, company contract with AIP that worked that way. Yeah. Okay.
And so, I can't remember off the top of my head because that AIP may have ended up producing it in the long run, but it didn't start out that way. And so that was kind of originally it probably would have been Vincent Price. And so then he came back in 1963 and did the Raven production. Peter Lorre's voice as the Raven is so awesome. It's really a lot of fun. One thing I wanted to read a quote from this book that Vincent Price, fondly remembering his roles in the Poe films, he said, some of the Poe villains have been fascinating. They were loosely based on Edgar Allan Poe, who doesn't write villains. He writes about men who are put upon by life. This is a great difference between a horror villain and a man who has been put upon by life. And then he goes on to talk about like Frankenstein and the monster and things like that, and talking about a little bit about Mary Shelley. And so I thought I liked that quote a whole lot because it really sums up how Poe writes, just in the horror vein.
Yeah, absolutely. You think about each of those characters, you can see something in them. You can
Yes.
see some of yourself in there. We've all been wronged. We got a little
Yes.
Montresor in all of us, right? You just hope you're not
Oh,
on the
yeah.
Fortunato end of things.
That's right. That's right.
You've lost somebody. You feel like the poor guy in the Raven, and someone's irritated you for some odd reason. You can maybe see yourself in the Telltale Heart. I mean, there's
Yes.
you
Oh,
can
yeah.
you can see how it's scary, because you can probably look a little bit inward and go, oh yeah, okay, I got some of that.
Yeah, that thought
Yeah.
might have crossed my mind at some point or
Yeah,
another,
and Poe,
especially as being teachers.
yeah, and Poe epitomizes what it's always been told about someone who wants to be a writer. Everyone's always say the best writers are those that write about what they know.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
and Poe was the epitome of that. He wrote about tragedy. He wrote about his own life,
Mhm.
about his own struggles, his own black-heartedness, if we
Yes.
want to throw that in
Well,
there.
he was the Tomahawk critic. So,
Yes.
I mean,
So he had to have a little bit of resentment of those people around him,
Mhm.
especially considering who is adopted, foster father,
Yes,
whatever you want
father,
to call
yeah.
him.
Yeah.
And the way he was treated, even though he was supposedly one of those in that time period of the well-bred,
Mhm.
he wasn't treated that way in most aspects because he was just the poster child, for lack of a better way
Yeah.
of saying it.
Oh,
Yeah, he was the
Yeah.
poster child. So, and he just really brought that into his writing, into his
Mhm.
poems, into anything. And you just sit there as you're reading going, yeah, I did that. Oh, I can see myself doing that.
Yes.
Exactly.
And especially like the one with the black cat,
Mhm.
how
Oh.
he knows he's done something wrong, but he wants to share that. He wants to get accolades for what he did to fix the problem.
Mhm.
It's like his wife was being mean to him, but he wanted to put a stop to it, and he did, but he wanted someone to share it with so he
Mhm.
could feel good about himself. And it turned, and like many things, no good deed goes unpunished kind of thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so Price also did two other Poe films that were, I kind of said Sans Corman, The Oblong Box in 1969. And this one has two titles. It has the British title and it has the American title,
Mhm.
The Witchfinder General or Conqueror Worm. And that was in 1968. And I actually have not seen that one yet, but I've heard from a good friend. It's not as good as the Corman films, definitely. And then The Oblong Box I have watched, and it was a good film. It was a good film. I don't think it's as good as the Corman films, but it was a good one.
It was good because it's very different.
Yes. Yes.
And it's not the traditional Gothic Poe style, and I
Yes.
think, I mean, there's, of course, you get the supernatural aspect and so forth, but it's one of those nautical stories that very, very different from the remainder of them. And it it was one of, I think, three that he did that were kind of based nautically, with MS Found in a Bottle, you got
Yes.
Oblong Box, and
Yes.
Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, and so with those, you've got a very select few, but they were very influential on like pirate stories and ghost stories and things like that. But it's not the standard that you think of when you think of just classic works of Poe.
Yes. Oh, and even the Gold Bug as well. Yeah. And I would love to see some of the Poe works that are not necessarily horror themed become, short movies or, full length movies or productions. I think it would be really interesting to see those done because, all of the aspects of Poe's writing, whether it be the science fiction, offshoot from horror, just the literary type things that he did. I guess the mysteries with the Dupin stories, we watched all three versions of the Murders in the Rue Morgue and kind of critiqued those. And they all had really good elements. And then they all had a few elements that we didn't necessarily like. And then we liked some movies more than others, but it was awesome to be able to look at all three and see the neat things of how people adapted them.
But it also boiled down to casting,
Yes.
because George
Yes.
C. Scott was by far the best Dupine casting.
Yes.
And it just once more goes back to those artists as the actors
Mhm.
that can really bring the story into
Yes.
play, because they are storytellers and they know how to tell the story.
Yeah, and put themselves in that character and
Mhm.
become that character.
And make
Definitely.
you believe that character.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
And especially
George C. Scott is a great cast, no matter what he's doing.
Yes. Oh,
yes. Just hearing his name and you're going, all right, I already picture it. You don't have
Yes.
to do
Absolutely.
anything else.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one.
It's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, and then one of the other things, Poe related with Price was the 1970 kind of one-man show that he did, An Evening with Edgar Allan Poe. Have either of you seen that?
No, not that one. Mm-mm.
Okay, I found it free on a channel one day, and I sewing is one of my hobbies, and so while I was sewing, I watched and listened to it, and it was absolutely phenomenal.
Mhm.
And so the stories that they chose to do was Telltale Heart, the Sphinx, and the quote that I read at the very beginning was from that story, The Cask of Amontillado, and The Pit and the Pendulum.
Mm.
And from what I read, the Sphinx was Vincent Price's favorite. And so that, he wanted to incorporate that. And he basically said that it was not only the best thing that he had done, but it was his favorite thing he had done of all the Poe works and things like that,
Mhm.
because he dressed up in the character and recited each of the stories, separately, throughout the production. And so that I just can't imagine, like, if that was performed live, like how amazing that would be to see him do that one-man show.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it would just be the epitome of the actor, the writing,
Mhm.
the cast of the whole scenery, because most of the time, and it's like when I used to teach, was director of the theater arts, trying to get these children to understand that it's not the costume as much as it is the actor who's building the whole thing.
Mhm.
Mhm.
You can have a great costume, you can have a great set, you can have props galore, but if you don't have an actor who is believable and can bring all that together to make it happen, then no one is going to buy into it. No one's going to be there. And just the thought of Vincent Price, just, storytelling, just him sitting there, like in The Raven. Think about The Raven,
Mhm.
sitting there, and I could just hear his voice reciting The Raven in a dark room, and the pecking
Yeah.
on the window, and it reminds me so much of just who he was.
Yeah.
If you can think of an actor and you can automatically bring him to mind and put him in any kind of character, then
Mhm.
that actor is a true actor.
Yes.
He's what he needs to be. He's the man that can make you understand things,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
comprehension's a big thing. That's why most people don't enjoy opera. That's why they say it's a love or hate issue. You either love it or you hate it. There's no middle ground.
Hey, what about a Poe opera?
Oh, there you go.
I don't even think Poe would go that far.
Maybe not.
I don't
Maybe
think
Hey,
not.
just
Poe
look at
would
it this way.
like
You
opera.
can't even spell opera without Poe. So there you have it.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. Love that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
that works.
yeah. And so, but Vincent Price, and kind of like talking about like you said, listening to some of the readings that he did of like The Raven and things like that. And then kind of going back to, at the point of his career at the end of the 70s, it had kind of gone, on a downward spiral, kind of, the autumn of his acting years. And then that resurgence in 1982, when they asked him to be the voice in Thriller.
Yep.
And that revived his career. And then, he went on to do, the part in Edward Scissorhands and all of that. And
Let's not forget Professor Ratigan.
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
yes.
Great mouse detective.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. His voice work. Oh, yeah, is amazing.
Yep.
And so one of the things that I really want to watch is the Tim Burton short about Edgar and Vincent and everything.
Yeah.
And because apparently like both of Poe and Vincent Price had a huge impact on him as well, just from some of the reading I've done.
Well, anyone in the industry that has that kind of, like Tim Burton's what we're talking about,
Mhm.
who has that love of the, let's just say it, the strange.
Yeah.
Because with Edward Scissorhands and then Nightmare Before Christmas and James and the Giant Peach and
Mhm.
you know, anyone that has that type of visual acumen is going to be one of those that you can just relate it back to the
Yeah.
greats of Vincent Price and all those, because he shows it in his work.
Mhm.
And any of us that have had, like with Edgar Allan Poe, with Shakespeare, any of us that have had those loves in our life, you can see it in some way in what we do for a living and
Absolutely.
what we love, what we write, what we do with anything,
Mhm.
because that is just the greatest accolade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
By
Well, think about
showing-
this, the new Netflix series Wednesday. That's Tim
Yes.
Burton, but how
Yes.
many Poe references are in that? From the
Exactly.
Nevermore Academy to the Raven Ball. I mean, it's
Exactly.
they're all over the place.
Oh, yeah. And then one of the things we are very excited about is the series of The Fall of the House of Usher, which is coming up soon. And we just watched The Pale Blue Eye. I had read the book and was so excited once I found out they were making the movie, even though it was not Poe written, the Poe character. And once I found out that Harry Belling was going to be cast as Poe, I was like, he is perfect for that role. That was just my gut
Looks
feeling.
like him.
Yes. Oh, yes. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but it is very well done.
It was kind of creepy.
Yes, but it should be. It should
I know,
be.
but it was just creepy. I mean, and
Don't give away spoilers.
I'm not going to. I'm just saying he was creepy.
Yeah.
It was creepy because seeing him, and one of the things we kept talking about is we wanted to slap a mustache on him just
Yes.
to say, you know, would it be more Edgar Allan Poe with the mustache, or is he more
Right.
Edgar Allan Poe without the mustache?
Yeah.
So
Well, and that's kind of the fun thing about Poe. Most people just associate the mustache with him, and he only had the mustache in the last few years of his life. And I don't think a lot of people know that. And so unshaven is really, probably more of who he was throughout most of his life.
probably took him that long to grow it.
Could have been. Could be.
I mean, I'm just saying, but because, and he had a lot of crap going on in the last years of his life too. So
True. Very true.
Yeah.
Well, and so Jason, like just, because we want to hear a little bit more about, your influences, like how much of Poe, just like in your background influenced you, and just even other writers and things.
yeah,
for
why
you to
did you
do.
even want to do this to begin with?
Right,
What
yes.
spurred this to happen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so I guess I'll start with saying that, having been a theater performer for a few years, and then in 2020, when we got shut down for COVID and everybody got kicked out of the theaters and stages got closed and everything else, we were 1 week into our run of the dinner party at the time, and I was on stage as Claude Pichon. And so that all got shut down, and I got to thinking, what am I going to do as a, theatrical entertainment kind of outlet during this time where now we're all at home. And so I took a class on audiobook narration, and I've been doing that for a few years now with narrating, 24 audiobooks at this point. But I also created an audio drama company, and I started it with a friend of mine who is also a theater actor there in Sacramento, California. And we did the first 3 productions we did as the 2 primary leads. And then in the one production, Manuscript Found in a Bottle, I did it solo. And then in the 5th production, Mask of the Red Death, we really opened it up, for a larger cast. But it was an effort to bring some stories that I really enjoyed to a new audience, but done in a way that I was interested in it. And I had a friend of mine, where I mentioned to her a little while ago that, artists create art for a variety of reasons. And sometimes it's the pay, sometimes it's a notoriety, but I think most of the time it's because we love doing it. Yes. And you're going to create this because it's your passion. It's a thing that you're most engaged in, and the product, you want it to be good. You want people to think it's good, but it's your baby. It's your passion project. It's what you're putting your heart and soul into. And what do I want to create as kind of our introduction to the world as an audio drama company, and how do we do this well? And so we thought about doing original works, create a script that's, just our own. And I've written a few, and I just didn't feel like that was the way to go. And I wanted to create something that I enjoyed the story. It's a genre I enjoy. It's an author I enjoy. And how do I bring that now to a new type of a medium? And so I've read the stories and I've watched films and so forth, but I'm a big audio drama and audiobook fan, and have listened to them for years and years. And really heavily influenced by, companies like Macabre Mansion and LA Theater Works and Alien Voices, really love that audio drama production quality, and wanted to really do that. But I didn't want to bite off a 2 or 3 hour project. And some of these Poe short stories, 30 minutes or less, and they're digestible in one sitting. You don't have to worry about, where did I put that second CD? You've got a chance to get them all done at one time. And we really enjoyed it. And I think there was a lot of creativity put into producing it. Sound effects, uniquely done. Personally created a multitude of them that are in our productions, or ones that I did myself, recorded my own footsteps and boot steps and up and down the stairs, and opening shutters and throwing open blinds and pouring drinks. And I mean, they're independently created in the large majority. The ones that aren't, I credit in the back of the production, which I think is a heavy wooden door opening and closing that obviously I don't have a gigantic castle door to be able to do that. And I can't record a thunderstorm quite as well as the one I used, that had an attribution license attached to it. So, those two things were kind of out of my scope, but everything else, I take shoes and, walk on a desk and record that. And, there's sit up and, get up and sit down on couches and just record all kinds of different things. And those things get utilized in the production. So
that just sounds like fun.
It's great. I wish I had a Foley table that had everything at arm's reach, and be able to do these kind of in a live setting with a Foley artist. That'd be awesome. But right now, they're individually captured and then recorded, and I go on to the next effect. But I think we've done a pretty good job.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. What I've listened to so far, it's great. It's really great.
Yeah. And as you were describing that, I just automatically thought back to like the early 40s and 50s, those people that were in the sidelines behind the curtains, and they had to react on cue with like ringing of the phone or beating something on the desk or walking. And how, like, I love Red Skelton. I don't know if anybody knows about Red Skelton or watching Skelton, but just that type of comedy. I know not a lot of it's comedic in especially in Poe, because we talked about his tragic lives, but in the comedy in those types of shows, just anyone who barely gets anything off kilter, and it's like, oh, you go back to Abbott and Costello, you go back to the greats that a lot of people don't know about. And so it just hear you talking about it and thinking about how we were confined during the COVID thing, because I'm just picturing myself if I was your neighbor and hearing all of this noise and you walking around and watching you through the window in the shadows, and you're going, should I call the police? Is there something going on?
We were wondering about that when I recorded the screams for Mask of the Red Death.
Oh, wow.
And we were recording that in an upstairs room, and I had people screaming into the wall corners to try to get the right kind of echoes and all kinds of things. And we're like, how many times can we do this before someone thinks that there's something else going on in here?
It's a Poe-esque tale happening live.
It was the COVID equivalent to Hitchcock's Rear Window.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm out in the backyard with an old pallet and a claw hammer, and I'm ripping up boards for the effects for Telltale Heart. So
That would be amazing, thinking
Yeah.
of how you can recreate those sounds. Yeah.
You should just made a video of doing all of that and having it like a blooper reel
Yes.
onto your YouTube channel. And everybody
yeah,
going,
that's
"Oh."
true. Yeah, I could probably recreate some of it, but I had so many times I would create one and I would just be so proud of it, and I'd go listen to it and I'm like, I don't even know what that is anymore. So
Oh
you'd have to
no.
go back and redo it, or you know, I remember walking on gravel and thinking how great that sounded and recording that, and I go back and all I hear is my breathing.
Oh wow. Oh wow.
Yeah.
So like, oh, okay, that's not going to work.
No.
So has that been one of the, like, is that kind of like maybe the hardest part of your productions, is like trying to recreate these sounds? Or
I think we're creating the effects. It's probably time consuming and challenging. It's very enjoyable because I know what sound I want, and it's creative to try to figure out what you can do to try to make the sound you want. For an example, in Cask of Amontillado, I've got Montresor being told by Fortunato to go over and grab 2 flambeaux out of the sconces, and so you hear like metal flambeau holders being removed from wall sconce, you know, contraptions.
okay.
In order to do that, I had a brass cup from India that my grandpa sent to my grandma in 1944 that I just used on a wooden stool and just slid it across a wooden stool, and it sounds perfect as metal
Wow.
scraping against metal. So just what sound do I want, and having to kind of create what do I think can get me there, even if it's absolutely not a wall sconce being used, you know, to bring torches out. It's still something that the listener can understand because it was just asked for. That effect happened. People will buy it.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
good.
that is really neat. I love all creative aspects, and just being able to create that kind of stuff, and just think, you know, how, like you said, you kind of think of the end in mind, where this is what I want it to sound like. How far do I have to go to get that sound? You know, to think of all the different things.
Well, and you know, some of it is organic and some of it is post-production.
Right.
And I found that during Cask of Amontillado, where Brennan and I were in the sound booth together and really feeding off each other's reactions to the script, that because Fortunato was wearing this jester's hat the whole time, he's got bells jingling. I wanted the bell jingle to not be put in after the fact. So I took a small Christmas ornament that I had that had about 15 bells on it, and I just held it against my shoulder. And so as we did the discussion back and forth, every time I turned, you heard what sounded like an organically moving series of bell jingles, because you would move your head, it would sound a different way. And it's hard to capture that after the fact. So we just did it live while we were recording and left it in.
That's awesome. That is amazing.
Yeah. And that goes very well with the creative process. And it just tells you that anyone, whether it be Poe, whether it be Orson Welles, whether it be Jason, you know, Hitchcock, anyone, that sometimes the best things are just natural.
Yes.
You know, that
Absolutely.
It just happens. And that's just what the, you know, life in itself is great, because sometimes it just happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And
you mentioned earlier about what other writers, and I'm a huge Jules Verne fan.
Okay.
As I was, you know, reading more and more about Poe, is how many other writers were influenced by him. You know, Joseph Conrad wrote a very nice, you know, review of Manuscript Found in a Bottle, and he you know, lauded Poe for his work. And you know, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was very influenced by him, and Jules Verne, and you know, he had a lot of these things that were written way before the people we just talked about were writing their stories. And even today, what Mystery Writers of America, you know, their you know, top award is the Edgar, you know.
Absolutely.
So you know, he influenced so many different genres, from sci-fi to mystery to horror and gothic works. It's amazing how many things really he had the baseline for.
I agree. And I mean, and that's kind of what our, you know, we call it our podcast, you know, is all about, is just how much that Edgar Allan Poe has influenced
Mhm.
so many different things, and it keeps going and going. I always say forevermore, and it just, we love to talk about it and dig into these rabbit holes. I know when Jeannie and I both do research separately,
Mhm.
we come back and talk about everything and decide what we're going to do, and then we'll say, well, oh my gosh, we found this, and that's going to be a whole new episode that we didn't know about. And so it's
Right.
just, it's so neat to see. And while I love the horror that Poe wrote, it's some of my favorites. There's so much more to him that we want people to know, because he was so diverse and in his writing, and so talented in so many different areas.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, and in his life,
yes.
because sometimes some of his most interesting aspects had nothing to do with his writing.
Right.
It was just him, and you're going, okay, that's just creepy, but all right, that's Poe.
Well, his whole life is a Poe-esque tale.
Exactly.
Definitely. And I know, like right now, for me, I teach freshman English. And so we've been doing Romeo and Juliet. We just kind of got started. And so, like I said, we're adding in a lot of poetry right now, because they need a lot of work on analyzing. And so I taught a Christopher Marlowe poem, and then today on Poe's birthday, I did this, specifically for this. You let them analyze on their own A Dream Within a Dream, because it tied into when Romeo talks about dreams and Queen Mab and all that. And whenever I've brought up Poe, and then I wore this to school too, and so they're like, is that Poe on your shirt? And so it got a lot of chuckles and stuff today, and they know I love Poe. But when I bring up Poe, or if anything's mentioned, they're always just like, oh, he's so creepy, he married his cousin, and then I tell them other things too, and they're like, oh, we didn't know that. And so again, just imparting the love of Poe, and hopefully this new generation, more into TikTok and things like that, will see like productions like you guys are doing, and listen to them and appreciate them, and people to keep on doing what we're all doing to promote him.
Yeah. It would be nice. I'd let you know, and just by the sheer fact it's 214th birthday, today. Obviously, the work is no less popular now than it ever has been, and the amount of people and groups and productions and movies and it just keeps growing. So that's definitely a positive sign.
I agree. And I was going to say, since we're talking about his birthday right now, so my husband and I love tiki type stuff. And so we came up with a cocktail. I'm going to grab yours.
Yep.
And so he put it in my Raven glass. This is from, well, you can't see it very well because it frosted over, but this is from Raven Beer up in Maryland. And the glass is from. And so we came up with what we are calling the 6 degrees of Tiki Poe. And so he has shared this recipe with some of our Tiki group that we're in. And the one reason why we kind of wanted to do it Tiki style, not just because we like Tiki, but when you think about Poe, you add Vincent Price portraying so many of Poe's stories so well. And you also add in that little extra of Vincent Price was on the Brady Bunch with his Tiki idol, just a little bit of Tiki there.
Oh,
so
Lord,
it kind of brings
in the Brady Bunch.
I'm doing it.
All right.
And so, anyway, so that's what we did. And so we did 6 ingredients. And so there's, the sweetness of simple syrup, and I'm going to add the recipe on our website and Facebook and Twitter later on this evening. But you have the sweet of the simple syrup for his, poetry. You have the blood orange juice for the horror. You have chili bitters for the spicy. He was a critic, and, he had that sharp tongue. Cognac to kind of represent a lot of the time frame that Poe lived in, and usually, and like the Poe toaster also used cognac for the toast. Falernum, which really brings it into tiki, which is very surrealistic when you think about the flavorings of how it tastes. And then you have Amontillado. You had to have Amontillado sherry, and that kind of brings in the science. And so it ties in all of the things about Poe in this cocktail.
That's awesome.
So if we will, let's raise our glass to Mr. Edgar Allan Poe on his 214th birthday. So cheers and happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Yes. So, well, Jason, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the Poecast. And if you would share out where everyone can find you. I love that you've got it on your screen, but if you want to kind of share out verbally.
Absolutely. So all of our work can always be found on our website, which is at www.markiewitzAudioworks.com, listed right there above my head.
Okay.
And then we do have a separate page, which this is my information here that you see on the screen. But if you go to YouTube, Markie Witz Audio Works Presents, go to Facebook, Markie Witz Audio Works Presents, you'll find our company, quote unquote, page, as well as our trailers and productions there on YouTube as well. And so we produce audio dramas. It started with Edgar Allan Poe, went into some Christmas productions, and now we're moving, into what our next long work will be. And we're probably leaning toward Treasure Island, as I said earlier, but we'll see what takes shape. But you can find a lot of work there, but you can always catch us on the website.
All right. Awesome.
Wonderful.
Thank you. And just, we will be sharing this video and audio on Spotify, video out on our YouTube channel. And you can also find us on Twitter, on Facebook. We have our webpage. We always remind all of our viewers and listeners of all of those.
Where you can find us.
Have I forgotten anything?
Let's see, Twitter, Facebook. No, I think you got it all.
Website and YouTube. Okay.
I think that's our main things. Spotify, we also are on Sirius XM platforms.
Yes, we're on a lot of different.
We're not on Apple yet.
Yeah,
but
I think Stitch.
Stitcher.
We've added a lot of different platforms for the actual audio part of it.
So just hunt down 6 Degrees of Edgar Allan Poe and you'll find us.
Yes, and on Tuesday, please join us. We have a link on our webpage on Poe Unplugged, and Jason is going to be joining us again, and we're going to be talking about the Raven and horror elements in the Raven specifically. And we might get to hear a little clip from his production of the Raven while we're discussing it. So please go out to our website and at the Poe Unplugged tab and sign up for that, and we'll send you a Zoom link, and we will be Zooming together Tuesday evening. At 7:30 Central Time.
And we look forward to anyone
or
that
7 Central Time. Sorry, 7 Central.
Yeah, 7 Central. Anyone that wants to join us, it is basically the Unbook Club.
Yes.
But Poe inspired.
Yes.
So it's become something of interesting discussions.
Yeah.
Psychologically, not just literary, but we all get to look into different aspects of understanding from people's different points of view. So it's a great place to.
Everybody brings a little something different to the table, and some of the things that people have brought up have been things that we hadn't even thought of, and it's like, oh wow, that's a great way to think of things like that. So
getting to know people from all over the United States, because we have people from the East Coast all the way to the West Coast.
Yes.
So.
All right. Well, we thank everybody. And for this, we are Poe out.
At midnight in the month of June, I stand beneath the mystic moon. An opiate vapor, dewy dim, exhales from out her golden rim, and softly dripping drop by drop upon the quiet mountaintop, steals drowsily and musically into the universal valley.
Thank you.